Hollywood froze when Michael B. Jordan, whose charisma and talent have made him a favorite of millions, found himself at the center of a storm on Jimmy Kimmel's show. What was meant to be another evening of jokes and movie promotion turned into a dramatic confrontation that exposed the hidden tensions of 2025 America. In a moment that shocked viewers, a single shout from the audience, sharp, venomous, shattered the facade of politeness, revealing the racism still lurking in society's shadows. Insiders described the tension backstage and the strength with which Michael faced injustice, forever altering the perception of that night. If you thought you knew what courage looks like, think again. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in the eye of such a storm? Michael stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, his figure in a dark suit radiating confidence, but his eyes hid something deeper. Fatigue, perhaps, or foreboding. Jimmy Kimmel, with his signature smile, greeted his guest, though even his playful tone felt somewhat strained. The 60-plus audience, making up most of the crowd, watched Michael with a mix of admiration and caution. To them, he was not just a movie star, but a symbol of a new era that both drew and unnerved them. The conversation started lightly. Jimmy joked about filming, about stunts Michael performed himself. But when the topic shifted to racism, a subject Michael often addressed in his projects, the atmosphere changed. Jimmy, trying to be delicate, asked, "Michael, you often speak about systemic racism. Do you think 2025 America has gotten better, or are we still stuck in the past?" Michael leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharpening. "Jimmy," he began, his voice calm but weighty, "we've taken steps forward, but the past casts long shadows. People still judge others by the color of their skin, not the content of their hearts. I've seen it with my own eyes, in Hollywood, on the streets, even in comments under my posts on X." Suddenly, a shout pierced the air, sharp and toxic like a knife. "Monkey!" The word tore through the silence like an explosion. The audience froze. Jimmy froze behind his desk, his smile fading. The cameras buzzing around the stage seemed too loud for a moment. Michael, whose eyes had been fixed on Jimmy, slowly turned his head toward the audience. His face remained impassive, but a faint tension flickered at the corners of his mouth. Security rushed to the stands, searching for the culprit, but the room was dark, the crowd dense. Jimmy, trying to defuse the situation, mumbled something about isolated idiots, but his words drowned in the audience's whispers. Michael raised his hand, stopping him. "No, Jimmy," he said quietly, yet loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's not pretend that didn't happen." He stood from his chair, his presence suddenly taller, more powerful. "I'm not surprised," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "I've heard it before, and you know what? It's not about me. It's about them. About those who hide behind words because they're afraid of the truth." The audience stilled, sensing the tension in the studio rising like the prelude to an explosion. Call to action. What would you do if you were Michael in that moment? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. How would you respond to such injustice? The next few minutes in the studio were chaotic. Producers whispered frantically through headsets, cameras buzzed, and Jimmy tried to steer the show back to the script, but Michael had other plans. He didn't sit back down. Instead, he took a step toward the edge of the stage, closer to the audience, his eyes burning with quiet, unyielding resolve. "I grew up in Newark," he began, his voice steady but piercing like steel. "My mum worked 2 jobs so my brothers and I could eat. My dad taught me that dignity isn't something you're given, it's something you carry. And I won't let anyone, in this room or outside it, take my dignity." The audience, initially buzzing with shock, began to clap, sporadically, hesitantly. But the applause grew. Not everyone joined in. Some sat with arms crossed, their faces a mix of discomfort and disdain. Michael noticed but held his gaze steady. He turned to Jimmy. "You asked if America's changed. Here's your answer. We're still letting hate hide in the shadows. And I'm tired of it." Jimmy, feeling the pressure, tried to pivot to safer ground. "Michael, I get it. It's awful. But let's talk about your movie. You made it to inspire, right?" But Michael wasn't having it. "No, Jimmy, we're not talking about the movie when someone just called me a monkey. We're talking about this. Now." His words hit like lightning. The room fell silent, not from shock but anticipation. Michael turned back to the audience. I know many of you here, and those watching at home, grew up in a different America. You saw Martin Luther King, you remember the civil rights movement. You know what a fight is. But the fight isn't over. It's changed shape, but it's here. In words, in looks, in systems that let words like that fly without consequence. Suddenly, a woman stood in the back rows, her grey hair contrasting with her bright dress. Her voice trembled but was clear. Michael, I'm 72. I grew up in Alabama, where I saw people beaten for their skin color. I'm ashamed this is still happening. I'm sorry. Her words broke the silence, and a few in the audience began clapping, this time more earnestly. Michael nodded to her, his eyes glistening but composed. Thank you, Ma'am, he said. But apologies aren't the end. They're the start. We all have to do more. Producers signaled Jimmy for a commercial break, but Michael raised his hand. I'm not done, he said, his voice calm but unwavering. Tonight, we're not just filming a show, we're starting a conversation. I want everyone in this room to think, what will you do when you see injustice? Stay silent or speak the truth? The tension in the studio peaked. Cameras captured every move, every glance. On X, posts about the incident were already surfacing. Some called Michael a hero, others accused him of over-dramatizing. But in the studio, in that moment, everyone felt something shifting. The commercial break ended, but the tension lingered. The stage lights seemed brighter, colder, as if illuminating not just the set, but the souls of everyone present. Michael returned to his chair, but his posture was different. Not an actor, not a star, but a man who refused to back down. Jimmy, sensing the show had spiraled out of control, tried to lighten the mood, but Michael cut in. Jimmy, I need to say something, he began, his voice quiet but bone deep. I didn't come here to entertain. I came to remind us all that we can be better. That the America we love isn't just an anthem or a flag. It's people. All people. He turned to the audience, his eyes blazing. The person who shouted that word is hiding in the shadows. But I'm not hiding. I'm standing here saying, I'm Michael B. Jordan, a son, a brother, an actor, an American. And I won't let hate define who I am. The room erupted in applause, loud and genuine. Even those who'd sat with crossed arms began to clap. The woman from Alabama stood, wiping tears. Jimmy, seizing the moment, finally joined in. Michael, you're right, and I'm grateful you're here to say it. But Michael wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone and opened X. Here's what I want to do, he said, holding the phone up. I want everyone watching this show to go on X and post one word, dignity. Because that's what we're fighting for. Not victory, not fame, but dignity. For ourselves, for others, for this country. The cameras zoomed in on his face, and in that moment, everyone in the studio and millions watching at home saw not just a celebrity, but a man using his voice to challenge injustice. On X, the hashtag dignity began trending, with thousands joining in, sharing stories of their own struggles with prejudice. The climax came when Michael turned to Jimmy. I don't want this moment remembered as a scandal, he said. I want it remembered as the moment we all chose to be better. For our kids, our grandkids, for the America we leave behind. The show ended to roaring applause, but the real victory wasn't in the ovation. It was in the silence that followed. A silence where everyone in the room, and at home, reflected on their actions, their words, their role in the fight for justice. Call to action. What part of this story struck you most? Share in the comments. Was it Michael's defiance, the Alabama woman's words, or the call for dignity? Tell us what made you think. This story isn't just about Michael B. Jordan or one night on Jimmy Kimmel's show. It's about the power of one person choosing dignity in the face of hate. For an audience that's seen America change over decades, it's a reminder. The fight for justice doesn't end, but every voice matters. In 2025, when platforms like X amplify both hate and hope, we all have a choice, to stay silent or to speak. Michael chose the latter. What will you choose?